Cool.
All right, I'll start. Well, the guest we have today is Blair Porter. We actually met a few times during our piping career, but he's based in Scotland and was recently pipe surgeon, of Fife Polis pipe band in Grade 1. And we have a bit of a story where we played in the same band in Australia. Not at the same time, but we guested the same band in Australia. We also are both designers outside of, being part of a pipe band. So I'm very excited to have Blair on today and to talk more about just life in general, pipe bands, design and whatnot. So Blair, how are you doing?
Good, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Can you tell us a bit about yourself, like what you're up to these days, and if you're still playing?
Yeah. So I'm not really playing anymore. I've not really played probably properly since 2016, I think it was. So I've had a good few years out. I'm not sure if the fingers would still cope these days. But yeah, I guess background-wise, I suppose started many moons ago. So I'm from Aberdeen originally, and very early sort of pipe band life was started with the 47th Cooter BB pipe band, who sort of played there for a number of years. Jim Campbell was involved in. Some early tutor. Sandy Robertson was a fantastic tutor. Notorious, he broke some people's fingers if they made mistakes. So
no way.
Yeah, definitely. I could point you in the direction of a few people that have got broken fingers. That's for sure.
Yeah. That's a hard way.
He was ex-army, so he was this was back in 1989. It must have been when I first sort of started going, and I was 8 years old, and I sort of no connections to pipe band really, or piping in general, but it was a kind of local village thing, and a lot of people in the village did that. So
your family, no one was playing before? You just started picking up the pipes just because of the band?
Exactly, yeah. I heard the band probably when I was about 5 years old, playing at a street parade through the village, and said, I want to do that. And,
nice.
Sort of my supportive parents basically said, no one in the family's musical, there's no chance you can do that. So, so I had to pester them for a little while until they eventually took me along, and sort of was there for a number of years, which was great. They had a brilliant band, a brilliant tutoring system, and produced some amazing pipers and some amazing friendships over the years as well.
Was anyone else in that band that made it to Grade 1 or that you played with down the road? Or
so Paul Ritchie, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Paul at all.
He has great tunes. We played a few tunes from him with Bogle.
Yeah, and David Welsh was another one that went through the bands with as well. So he's in New Zealand now, but came through the bands with me at Cooter and then D-side.
That's right.
Shots laterally as well, and Black 10 together as well. So
that's right, and he lives in New Zealand now. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, and he was guesting for SFU for a number of years, and
that's true. Nice.
So,
and then, sorry, go ahead.
No, I said there's been loads of good players come through, regardless. Other players that have come through to play in Grade 1, but it was a really good grounding, and very appreciative for all the sort of tuition that we got.
That's awesome. And then from there, Aberdeen all the way down to Shots, where you played most of your piping careers.
Yeah, I played at Shots probably I think six maybe 7 seasons, something like that. So I played for Grade 3 band D-side Caledonia for since the formation really. We started in 95 and then I think 98, so I must have done 3 or 4 years there, and then 98 finished. Well, I was in my last year of school, passed my driving test and decided that I was going to go and play for Shots. So there was about 3 or 4 of us that drove down.
Oh, nice. A little crew. Nice.
yeah, from Aberdeen, drove down to Shorts twice a week. Yeah, it was great fun, and yeah, I guess that was the end of '98 season. So the start '99 was my first season with Shorts, which was great fun. It was,
Yeah.
Went into the band from a grade 3 level, not really, and from the northeast of Scotland, where at that time I think it was, or certainly my knowledge of sort of central belt bands was pretty low.
Yeah. And Shots was like
really
top. It was the top at the time, right? Like Madison was quite major, and it was like, I mean, we were talking about it. We had a little conversation last week, but it was top 3 all the time. It was definitely like a winning band at the time.
Yeah, I think at that time there was the top 3, so it would alternate between FM, SFU, and Shots, and
right.
Depends. I think the joke was Shots won it every 3 years, right? So you had to wait for your turn to come in. So I joined a year before that. But no, it was really, it was eye opening, and I think had lots of fun times.
What was the big thing when you arrived from grade 3? I'm just picturing someone, and up in Aberdeen, that's what, like 2 hours one way to come down. Although you're a couple of people, so that's great fun. But what was it like entering the room, and you're in grade 3? You just got your license out of school, like you enter the room, and you have some like big time player that like in that band room.
Yeah, it was pretty intimidating. I think very naive, I think, as well. I mean, I wasn't naive in the fact that I thought I was like brilliant. Probably the other way. I thought I was, I needed to really prove myself. So you go into these into the band hall, and there was so many amazing pipers around the table, and just going through the motions, and I think a lot of the times you doubt yourself. They've got the imposter syndrome of like, am I good enough to be here? And I think
right.
I also think that's quite healthy. To go in and have to sort of have the mentality of trying to prove yourself, and that you don't know everything. You're there to learn. And I thought, that was. Yeah, it was fun times. It was daunting, but I think the first year in the band, I didn't play at the first competition. Sort of got all the way up to final tune, and then Rab dropped me, which I was actually pretty grateful for.
Oh, really? You just didn't feel like you were ready for it?
The nerves were definitely dangling that day, but from then on, it was just just business as usual, and that was good fun.
What was your favorite memory or competition or just time with the band? I know band bus, like going to a competition is always fun. So
I think that the most memorable was obviously winning the Worlds in 2000. That was like
that was the first one, right?
First one, yeah, and there's days before YouTube and things like that. So there's no kind of like digital record. There's obviously the CDs and what have you, but there's no there's not many places you can get your hands on those sorts of recordings or videos or anything like that. So that was really special, and even more so the next day we actually got on the bus to go over to Brittany.
That's right. You said that. Yeah.
Went to Gangon, infamously. Jake Jorgensen's first trip with Shots, and he slept in and missed the trip. So
I really hope I can get him on the podcast and chat about it. That's funny. That was his first competition, like first outing with the band. Missed the bus. Classic.
Well, no, he didn't. He was still playing with Heather pipes and drums in Denmark, but he was due to come in at the end of the season, and so the band had kind of organised for him to go on this trip with us. And slept in and missed the bus.
Nice little memory. And then you went, was it for a concert in Gangon or was it, I forgot.
It was like a festival. I think we were there for a week, and, it was great fun, it was loads of laughs, loads of going on.
Especially after the Worlds Week, right? Like where you're practicing 4 times that week, pressure is on, you you want to do well, and then right after that, it's like, okay, I can just relax and have a good time. Yeah, that's awesome.
That definitely sticks in the mind as one of the best sort of trips for various reasons, obviously. But coming off the back of the first Worlds, and it's pretty special.
Good, that's awesome. And then I was just saying earlier, but we not at the same time. I think I played in Australia. I moved to Australia for a year, and I was guesting with Blacktown. I don't know if they're still around, but definitely not the band that it was when you were or where I was. And for me, it was out of school, and I didn't quite know what to do. Actually, no, I was going to join the AirSCMD at the time, the conservatoire. And I was late in my submission, and I was like, okay, what do I do for a year? Basically, I had a year before the next submission. And this band, Keith Toombs, reached out to me. He was leading drummer at the time, reached out to me. He was like, hey, we're looking for guest players. Like, would you like to come? And I remember I had, not thought about going to Australia. It was probably, the further, thing I could do. But my dad had been in Sydney. He was like, oh, it's a great city. You would love it. I think you should go. And I was like, sure. I don't know anyone. I don't know who these people are, but why not? And I flew there, and I had the time of my life, and I had a great time. Did that for about a year. Yeah. What was your story going to Australia? I mean, now it's popular. You see a lot more people going, but at the time it was not that many players, including you, going down there.
Yeah. I think when I'd always kind of quite fancied traveling after university. So, 2003 graduated and decided to go down under. And I think I think Blacktown had been advertising for players to go and guest. I thought, why not? What I've got to lose here? So,
it's sunny.
So
why not?
Exactly. So headed out. Literally, it was another trip actually off the back of the Worlds 2003. So just we won the Worlds 2003, and then the next, I don't think I played it. So I didn't play at Cowell that year actually, and literally just got on the flight, went over to Oz. Maybe she'd have booked more trips directly after the Worlds. Thinking about it.
I know.
But yeah, so went over there, had an absolute blast. Met my now wife.
That's right.
She was tenor drummer in the band and daughter of Barry Gray, who was the pipe major.
Yeah.
Organised the whole trip, and so yeah, that was a great experience.
Was anyone else with you? Was it just you from the UK?
Just myself from the UK, I think. I'm trying to remember, so long ago now. Yeah, but there was a few other guys that sort of came over. There was Greg Lowe was at St Lawrence O'Toole. He came over, I think, maybe the following year. I don't know if he was with you, Claire, I'm not sure. He played with Greg. And there was Nate from Alberta, Caledonia came out as well. There's quite a few guys that had played at a good level that sort of came out, and yeah.
Nice. It was good fun for me. So I can picture, a bunch of people coming from, I had someone from Canada as well. I had two other people from, one from FM and Cameron Barnes actually from Fife.
Yep.
And it was, it was good fun. You do you play music, you teach on the side, you go to the beach. It's great way to spend 1 year playing music.
Yeah, we had a trip actually over in Oz as well, where I think the Dragoon Guards were supposed to be doing a tour of the East Coast, and I don't know if it had been maybe Afghanistan or something. There'd been some kind of change in scenario or change in situation that the tour had essentially been cancelled. So Barry had sort of landed the role of trying to put together a band to do this tour, which was started in Cairns and went all the way down the East Coast, right down to basically Adelaide, and then finished up in the Opera House. And it's like, you fancy doing it? It's like, yeah, it's like 31 days. There was 29 gigs in 31 days.
20, so it was like a gig a day, basically. You just play. Yeah. It's like being a rock star at that point.
It almost killed me. It was good. It was good fun, but the the amount of boozing and, I mean, we would literally just go, if we would go to the sort of concert venue, we would do a sound check, we would go and like grab a really quick dinner, which was probably McDonald's or something like that.
Yeah.
We would get dressed, do the concert, go to the pub, do a tiny bit of sleeping in the hotel, and then mostly sleeping in the bus on the way to the next venue. And then you just do the same thing over and over.
Over
again.
and over. Oh my God.
But yeah, it was really cool. I played the Opera House, which was, a sort of massive highlight. And yeah.
I mean, that's once in a lifetime when you play there, right? Like, it's such a cool venue.
Yeah.
That is awesome. Yeah, good time in Australia. And then last week we talked a bit about, it's so funny, starting to see like I call it the pipe band transfer season. It's just like, playing football, you have like the right before the Worlds, like, people moving in and out, of bands and stuff like that. Just announced today that Gordon Brown is actually retiring and Kerr McCullen is taking over as leading drummer. And we were talking about how even when I joined the pipe band scene from France, it was quite a rivalry between bands. Like it was clearly like, if you're Bogle, you're Bogle only, or if you're for shots, it's just that, right? And we touched a bit about how bands were a lot more like, don't share music, don't talk to other people from other bands, like, and you had a funny memory of someone that you met, one of your best friends now through that memory. Can you tell us more about it?
Yeah, so yeah, going back to the early 2000s, I mean, it was so like cloak and dagger that, you didn't really speak to other bands at all. It was like shots. I mean, it was quite, it was insular, like you're saying, Bog Hall was the same in FM. And so nothing, you didn't really have mates in other bands. And I think for the better now, like pipe bands have totally changed. And everyone's kind of good pals with everyone. And I don't know, I think maybe part of that as well, the youth bands maybe helped that situation where, there's a lot of players who will play for different bands within that, but still, or it might just be the fact that everyone's just not as miserable anymore.
Just people are more friendly right now. Yeah. Probably. But it's good for the music itself. Like it's good for, engineering, creativity and but also people are playing different styles, if you're a drummer, at least, if you change bands, you learn new things and you become a better musician altogether.
Yeah. I think, and styles are a really interesting thing. And back then, Shots had a very defined style. FM had a very defined style. And, SFU likewise, and Boghorn, Power, all these bands were very much, had their own style. Whereas potentially now it's a bit more, not diluted, but, you could kind of, it wasn't as obvious who was playing sometimes, You
know what? I say what I just say, but it's so true. Like if, you listen to a lot of bands, obviously coming from a drummer standpoint, Jim Kilpatrick has so much influence on drummers in general. And you hear now a lot of bands that have sort of that certain style, right? But you don't have that uniqueness that, maybe back in the days, it was very distinct between Eric Ward's style or even Gordon. Jim had his own style, obviously, but now it's a little more like, okay, there's a general style that comes out, and bands are not sounding the same, but almost, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, again, we touched on this last week, thinking about, I guess, pipe bands in general, and from having been out of it for so long, like I absolutely, was and still am like mega competitive. Like, it has to, there's no point in doing something if you're not going to do it to the best of your ability, right? And so I think, when you're looking at the sort of creativity of bands, I think, I don't know why, in my head I'd sort of thought that things during COVID somehow would come out of the other side and the bands would be all like super creative and, there's some amazing medleys out there and, the bands have done amazingly well to be out, but you're sort of looking at it and the rules within the RSPBA are stifling bands, I would say, and nothing's really changed in the last however many years, really. So yeah, I think, and if you do then stand out, someone like, I don't know, I can't remember which year it was, Toronto Police, 2007, 8, something like that, had a pretty off the scale kind of medley, which, you know, got looked upon, you know, pretty badly from a judging point of view.
Yeah,
and I think,
but the crowd,
you know,
liked it.
But then if you look at what the bagpipe bands are doing, you know, there's all orchestral, and there's real kind of build and drive within the music. Then, you know, I think pipe bands could maybe learn a little bit from that. And, you know, I think the other thing as well was back in 2001, 2002, something like that, Shots played a 4-beat E at the start of one of the medleys.
That's right.
And that was like, I remember vividly Rab checking all the rule books and, you know, making sure that we were okay.
Going through the whole thing.
Got to do that, and it sounds so crazy that you hold a beat, you know, hold a note for an extra 2 beats, and that somehow is like, you know, gets a black mark.
Did you guys got a judge badly for it? Do you remember? I can't remember, but
I don't think so. We didn't win the Worlds that year anyway, but I don't think we got judged badly, but I think, you know, Inveraray are doing the same thing again this year, and
that's right.
Inveraray are obviously a massively sort of creative, you know, outfit, you know, and fantastic band, and it sort of feels a little bit frustrating that it's not moved on, because
between that first, I don't know if another band's done it in between, but between when you guys were doing it with Shots and then 2022. Inveraray doing it is a huge gap, right? There's part, you know, so yeah, that's huge. And yeah, you have a band like Toronto Police, like really, really out there, but still within those rules. And I think, I wish, you know, we talked about it, but obviously you have COVID, but you're like, I wish all the bands would have been like, wow, they're okay, that's really far out, but they're still within those rules, and maybe there's a way to kind of like play around it. And it's funny talking to Chris Armstrong in one of the previous episodes, is touching on that topic as well, where, you know, it's there's certain rules, and it's good to have rules. It's good to have, you know, sort of time signature you have to stay in, but then the overall sort of presentation, you know, is kind of like been the same and will be the same, and bands aren't taking too much risk.
Yeah, I think it's essentially, and certainly when I was at Fife and quite heavily involved in the medleys, that it's almost like a formula. You know, you've got either finish with your jigs or you finish with your reels, and that's maybe a very simplistic way of looking at it, but essentially that was kind of, you know, if you were going to, you know, pieces of the puzzle, you had to sort of link those together, and unless you had some very elaborate bridges or, you know,
right,
to change the time signatures, then it was quite difficult to go from one to another. So,
yeah,
I hope there'll be sort of change soon, I suppose, and you know, I think it would be interesting.
Well, it's conversations and you know, hopefully it'll change. I was curious though, you know, obviously you went from Shots to, or maybe you stopped for a few years, you said that, and then you started Fife. And from like a, you know, a music standpoint, you know, now you're in charge, right? You're not just someone that rolling at band practice. And how was the season? Like, how would you approach the season? You start in September, October, you would pick tunes. What was the sort of the process there?
Yeah, we were pretty full on into it. So it'd be September, especially the first year, we were sort of collating this pipe core that we didn't really know. You know, we knew the guys like on a sort of personal level,
right,
majority of them, but yeah, it was diving off the deep end. You know, we didn't know if we were going to be grade 1 or grade 2. We didn't know if we had a drum corps. I think you know, it was definitely a sort of jump into the unknown, which was really exciting. You know, it was really cool to be involved in, and you know, there was you know, Drew and Jimmy and Doogie, myself and Mish Gray. So there was 6 of us that sort of left Shots and went off to start
at the same time.
Fife.
You left at the same time, and you were like, I think we should join a band. Yeah, right.
Yeah. So I mean, I left Shots in 2003, went to Oz, didn't play then again until 2007. And when I came back to Shots, a lot had changed at Shots, and I wasn't really enjoying it. And it was pretty clear that a few others weren't sort of enjoying that period either. So I think, I don't know if this is common knowledge or not, but I think that Jimmy had gone for the Loads and Borders sort of pipe majorship, and then Fife Police realised they didn't have a police band. They were the only sort of constabulary in Scotland that didn't have
That's
one.
right.
So that essentially that was how it then started. So, we sort of, we didn't break away from Shots. We were going to be leaving anyway, and
right.
Sort of, started the band, and it was great. Leannis was leading drummer at the time as well, and we had it was super exciting, and totally winging it. We didn't really know what we were doing. I say we, obviously Jimmy and Drew and Lee had a much better idea than me, but it changed my sort of role within the band from being, like you say, just a player at Shots to being setting the tone or having much more involvement, which was a big change, but I absolutely loved it. It was really, that sense of ownership, and that's,
You were at the time where you needed that, right? In your next step in your piping career, where you're like, okay, I've done the band stuff. I want to have a little bit more of a say.
Yeah. So, and that was great. And Jimmy was pipe major for however many years, 3-4 years, I'm not sure. And then Drew stepped in, and then laterally, obviously, Doogie as well. So, and I was pipe sergeant for Drew and Doogie. Which
Did you think about
Drew's and Doogie's style are very different in terms of pipe major, so I had to be quite nimble and adapt to my role as pipe sergeant and sort of.
Right. We were talking about good cop, bad cop, right? You need to, though, right, in the band.
Yeah, definitely. So obviously Doogie's super laid back, so I had to be the sort of, bad cop in that situation, which, I actually managed to do pretty easily, to be honest.
Yeah, you were saying that. And did you ever think about, like, obviously you've done pipe surgeon for 2 pipe majors. Did you ever think about what if it's me? What if I could be the pipe major and sort of take the band?
Not really. I mean, I would never sort of, I never say never, but I don't think that, at Fife, there was no way that I was going to say I should be pipe major over Doogie Murray. That's never going to happen. And Doogie and I, go back to Shots days, and we're great friends, and someone I've got, an awful lot of time for, and that, that was, we had such a great relationship at Fife as well, and understood the music and the sound, and we had a very similar ear for both music and sound. So that was a real joy. But, I would always consider myself as a band player,
Right.
To be a pipe major, you need to have a little bit more maybe solo career about you potentially. Maybe that's not true, but yeah, certainly I didn't ever have the sort of ego to think I should be pipe major.
Right. Takes time too.
Yeah, the pipe sergeant takes time. It takes a lot of time.
Actually, I say that, but yeah.
And I think that it was interesting because that latterly towards the end of the time Fife was, I've got my own business, and I was writing harmonies like not every day, but it was consuming all my mental energy. I was sort of thinking, I could do that, we could do that.
Right.
So I remember this very vividly. I was sitting with a guy that I think first employee was sitting working, and I was like writing harmonies. Like,
hey, what do you think of this? What do you think of this? And just pull out the chanter.
It's like, what are we doing?
What are you talking about?
And so so that sort of point, and then we had kids on the way and stuff like that. It just wasn't going to be like available at that point in time, and just I guess you fall out of it, and you kind of certainly I've sort of not necessarily missed I really missed the camaraderie, and I really missed the competition as well. But I don't miss the practice
like twice a week and weekend practices and stuff. It's so funny talking to people that have stopped. They always say, I miss the camaraderie. I miss, the banters, going out with the team and the competition. But then all the, the winter and, the hard work during the preseason is not something. Yeah. Going back to like the sort of the preseason or your role as pipe surgeon, like, what was the tune selection process like? Was it pretty open between people in the band, or only you and the pipe major at the time?
Yeah, everyone could throw tunes in the ring. There was a lot, some not particularly brilliant tunes got thrown in the ring, but generally, everyone kind of knew the style. And I also think that if someone's willing to put their head above the parapet and think, actually, I'm going to suggest this tune, then fair play, and they've thought about that process, and they've not just jumped into it and thought, I'm just going to say this tune because it's the only tune that can come into my head, So
yeah,
I think it was all open. I mean, you mentioned Cammy Barnes before, and Cammy, laterally within Fife, had obviously quite a big kind of input into the medleys as well, and a very, very musical guy, and
very.
Happy to sort of kind of always came up with good suggestions. Sometimes they needed rein back a little bit.
Yeah, that's creative people, It's just always like what's pushing to the max. It's funny we're talking about like everyone was welcome to throw tunes, and there's a recent articles on pipe strums about 78. It's not on pipe strums actually. It's Danaber, which forgot the name of the piper, but who played with 78 at the time where they were world champion, and apparently used, it was very collaborative, but also people were, also saying that was like, that's terrible tunes, or, what are you thinking, or just kind of laughing about like, why are you even bringing this tune up, but that's also part of how you create a good medley, or how you create camaraderie, right? Like where people kind of like tease each other. Sometimes it could be mean, but sometimes it's like, well, there's something really interesting there.
Yeah, definitely. And the man management of that is very interesting as well, because, within that camaraderie, there's always a guy that's the butt of the jokes that can take the jokes as well.
Right.
And there's always someone, so there's always a good, the mix of players, I think, is very important as well. You can't have everyone that's too serious, and you can't have everyone that doesn't take it seriously enough. So,
right.
And at Fife, we were pretty lucky that we had quite a good mix with some great times, some friends that, lifelong friends.
Right.
That we still keep up with and go for beers with now and again. And it's all, it's like, when it's like a good mate, it's like going
right. Yeah.
You're back to being in the band hall, carrying on, and having a laugh and a joke, and laughing about some times that were maybe unfortunate, but yeah.
Right. I mean, you do spend a lot of time, right? You spend, 2 practices a week for a grade 1 band, and then competitions and concerts or whatnot. Like you do spend quite a lot of time, right? So you create a certain connection. So you mentioned you arrived in the band, you weren't sure if it was grade 2, grade 1, you pulled those players together. That must have been like, again, going from grade 3 to shots, top of the world, and then going back to a band that is like not sure grade 2, grade 1, and then Mick O'Neill, right, joined the band on a drum corps. That must have been like a boost as well to help have at least that kind of like back end.
Yeah, no, it was great when Mick came in. And I think Lee did a brilliant job, but Mick had the sort of core established, I suppose, and that kind of, we were actually in Australia when all that sort of happened, and I was glad to not be part of any of it. But it was obviously, when some drummers move on or people move on, it's always, it's
right.
not the nicest of times. Right? So
yeah.
But yeah, it was an interesting process as well, because shots did get such a hard time for being, poor pipe corps.
Right.
Like you're saying, the 78 thing, and people saying, "Oh, I don't like the music," etc. And Shots did get, the piping got bashed quite a lot, and you had likes of Dougie Murray, Jimmy Murray, Glenn Brown, Callum Bowman, James Bowman. There was like
big
some
names.
Yeah, and so I think a lot of that was, I would say this, of course, but a bit unfair. But then it's funny how it affects you as well, because going to Fife, I felt I had to prove myself again.
Really?
Going to the band hall full of people that I didn't know, had won the world's twice with Shots, and
they're gonna look at everything you do, and
I need to make sure that no one's questioning my ability here. So,
that's funny.
It was interesting times, and interesting psychologically about that as well. But we definitely had the underdog mentality as well, which is such a good thing to have.
Right.
I really enjoyed that about Fife, is that you were trying to take the next scalp and then the next scalp and sort of
right, and go up and look up. Yeah. That helps get a team spirit, and kind of at least you're going, you have a goal, you're going for something, right? Where probably at Shots at the time, it was competition was really starting. It was SFU coming in, and it was that top three. I mean, it was really for 10 years. It was literally SFU, FM, or Shots, which is crazy to think about. But better now, a little bit more variety, and bands are rotating a bit. But we're obviously talking about the music and stuff. If you and I asked you this question last week, but it was you've been with obviously Rap Matheson, amazing writer, tune writer, and composer. Some of the best medleys ever coming from that time where he was a pipe major, and then you being involved with Fife. It doesn't necessarily need to be one of the bands that you've played with, but is there obviously not this year because it's just back from COVID and stuff, but what was your favorite medley or a tune or part of a medley that inspired you and were like, wow, you know what, that's not even my band and I'm really enjoying this? Maybe from back in the days or more modern times.
Yeah, I mean, this sort of, I guess, two medleys that stick out in my mind from SFU Cosmos Cascade.
Yeah.
Was
Bradford.
Yeah, brilliant. Absolutely loved that medley. And I think that was a shift in time for pipe bands. I think the pipe bands definitely then realised that they needed to up the game slightly. So I think that for me was a moment in time medley. And yeah,
what would you say? What would you scream back to that one? You say, oh, it's at a time where maybe bands had to step up because the harmonies were just the whole piece. It was a whole piece together, and the ending, the intro. What was it that you really were like, wow, that was groundbreaking. That was refreshing in you. What was it?
Yeah, it was clever. It was really clever. It was really well orchestrated. Actually, the harmonies and also the simplicity of Athol Highlanders. If I'd gone up to the band and said, I don't know, guys, I think we should play Athol Highlanders.
Do you think they'd be like, what are you even thinking?
Exactly. But it was so well done. Also, Inveraray do that very well as well, and FM obviously as well. So we played some, traditional tunes, and that's something that I really enjoy, is hearing tunes. Traditional tunes played slightly differently, or slightly different variations, or a few bits that take you by surprise. I think that's, for me, is really, really nice. And I think the other medley, actually going way back to pre-Shots time, was listening to the Paul Kemet 91 medley, Davy Barnes, which was completely off the charts back then. But
in what way? In what way? I need to listen to it, but
you'll need to check. I'm showing my age now, but yeah, it was on cassette, and it was just very unusual, and drum scores as well, like totally out there.
Right.
So yeah,
you need that though, right? Once in a while, you need something like we talked about Terminal Police. Like you need that kind of like spice in that people remember. I mean, honestly, looking back, yeah, Christmas Casket definitely one of my top, but everyone talks about that one time Terminal Police did that one medley. But do you remember?
yeah.
Do you remember? I don't know, not to drop names or anything, but do you remember another top 10 band in Grade One, like their Medley 10 years ago or 5 years ago? Probably not.
No, probably not. I mean, I think there's. I think the winning bands, you sort of generally you'll remember their medleys, or
Right.
FM obviously, and Inverary had some really nice medleys as well. But with that, I mean, that's obviously speaking about Chris earlier. Chris puts together some like super complex medleys, and there's obviously method behind what he does. And I think I can't remember which medley it was now, but at the time I remember listening to it and not rating it at all. And then the next year they played it and absolutely loved it. And it just took that time to sort of embed and settle. And
interesting. So, was it the paper when they played paper? Yeah, we talked about it. It took a while. It's funny. He was saying you should listen to the episode when it comes out. But he was saying that it had the idea for 4 or 5 years, and it took a little bit to kind of like nurture and get there. And then he was like, right, I think that's. I mean, you listen to it, but I think we're good to go. And I again, that's one of those medleys that I remember because it was unique in some ways. But you were like, first time you heard it, you were like, not sure, and then
I wasn't sure, and I think there's such a fine line between playing something that people recognise and but then also being boring. If you're just playing tune after tune that everyone recognises, then but then you flip that on its head and you're Toronto Police and you play a tune, a medley of tunes that no one knows.
Yeah,
there's a fine line there, and I think it's having the tunes that have that kind of like instant impact. You may not know the tune, but it's very melodic and you can kind of identify with it. But then there's also the other medley actually that sticks in my mind was with Don Bradford's Strathclyde Police medley, probably going back 2011 maybe, somewhere around about there. Which again, at the first listen, wasn't a massive fan of, and then the next year absolutely loved it. So there's definitely those medleys that are maybe too clever for my ears. But
was it you talking about the medley, right? Itself, yeah.
I can't remember the medley, but yeah, Don definitely had an amazing medley one year, and it went straight over my head.
Oh, really? Wow, that's interesting.
And the next year loved it as well. So yeah, maybe I'm just takes a bit of time for me to like appreciate stuff. Maybe that's all it is.
Yeah. So people are different. That's awesome.
This is why I'm not a judge. I'm having to judge it on the day.
Would you judge? Would you be a judge?
I thought about it years ago. Actually, I thought it'd be quite interesting. The politics, as everyone knows, is so frustrating, and it's not something that I don't know. It's difficult because you sort of think I would go in there and be totally impartial, and which you obviously you would be, but in the back of your mind, if someone's going to shaft another band, and you're thinking, well, that's not fair, and then you become, not that I would do that obviously, but I think that's the difficulty, and it was the case when I was playing in Grade 1. Certain judges knew where you were going to be, and I think everyone knows it's not necessarily
right,
but you can kind of work out where roughly bands can sometimes be. So
preferences too. I mean, it's the same. Drumming is the same.
Yeah, and it's not like it's it's people that have got agendas necessarily. It's just their preference, like you say. And I think, it's weird. I mean, I remember someone once speaking to me about it, saying, like, why do you compete? Like, why do pipe bands compete? And, like, it's one of the only musical sort of professions that sort of like properly compete against one another. Like, just play music and enjoy it. I mean, yeah. I don't know.
But there's so much time that goes into it. I mean, I don't know how many weeks and days and hours of practices that it's, if you're a competitor, like you mentioned, you are, and I am. And I think if you're in the top band, or any bands really, you have to, to go every week and week in, week out, you have to be, into winning, into competitions. But yeah, it's very true. Why not just do a concert?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think like I said, I'm super competitive, so I'd always want to sort of compete. But there'd be so many times start of the season, we'd go out with the first competition of the season, and it would feel like the entire season rested on one performance. So if you got out of the blocks, if you had a bad first championship or whatever it was, then it felt like you were
to climb back up.
To climb back up, and you could maybe go one place. But it was back then, I would say it was very odd that if you couldn't go from sixth to first. That generally wasn't going to happen. You maybe go sixth to fifth, and then maybe sneak a fourth, and there would be very sort of like slow kind of increments. Whereas now, obviously, and I think this season as well has been, Fife have been doing amazing. They were up to third and sixth, and other bands have sort of been flitting in between, even being out of the top six and coming back in and being right up there. And so I don't know if that's a COVID volatility off the back of it, but I don't know if that would have necessarily happened pre-COVID. I don't, I'm not sure.
It's good though, and you panel too of judges. I looked at the judges for the Worlds, and you do have obviously a new generation, more on the younger side, and that maybe help with that. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I hope so. It can't. Yeah, I think it's definitely a good step to sort of because also the bands have changed so much, even from in 20 years. The quality of band has improved massively. Now, if you think about, I don't know, back in 2000, you were maybe the same judges were from 1980, and the increment of 1980 to 2000,
huge.
It's massive.
Technically, sound, instrument itself, it's changed.
So and style as well. So, I think moving, and because, like you're saying, the styles have maybe amalgamated into slightly more, sort of, I don't know how you would describe it, but, more like a constant.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Then maybe that might help in terms of the preferential judging as well, because people will be comparing very similar things. It goes back to, judging some of the lower grades and things like that. How it's very, very difficult to, how do you judge, some of these bands against each other when, for me, it's all about sound. If a band's got a good sound, then, I would obviously, that, and, if the playing's maybe not quite as good as other bands, then I would probably put the band that had the better sound above. But I think the levels that we're talking about in grade one now is definitely there are differences clearly, but it's the standards really, really good and such small margin, and potentially some of the the greatest of respect, some of the sort of judges that maybe hadn't played at that level even 40 years ago will be struggle to pick up those little nuances in grade one at the level it is now.
Yeah, no, for sure.
It's a very difficult topic.
It is. Yeah. We did say we wouldn't talk about it, but the conversation led us there. But this is awesome. It's a great conversation. But just to wrap it up, I want to talk about our shared love of design and creativity. So obviously you're super talented piper at night, but then during the day you also run your own company. Who, for those that probably don't know much, is doing extremely well. Obviously, being part of the design scene, it's really really doing well. So it's great to do. It's great to see this coming from someone that know you and know you from not design but someone else or something else, which is bagpipe. And tell us more about like what the company does briefly and what you do.
Yeah. So we do computer generated images. So we work a lot with marketing departments and product designers, architects, interior designers, and we basically visualize things that don't exist. We also do a lot of marketing visuals for like whiskey bottles, which actually do exist, but it's an equivalent of a sort of virtual photo shoot, I suppose, for want of a better word.
Right.
So started that back in 2010, I think it was, and then 6 years of that plus pipe bands, and then I think we maybe took on our first employee maybe 2015, and then we're now at 12 employees. So yeah, since pipe bands have dropped, there's been something else to sort of take up my time, I suppose.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm thinking back about what you were saying when you had the employee and you were in the band and you were writing harmonies. You should have hired someone that plays the pipes and can do the harmonies while you do the work.
That would have been the sensible thing. Unfortunately, there aren't many people in pipe bands that do 3D. That's the crux, unfortunately. But yeah, no, I think it's been interesting ride, and certainly would have been definitely difficult to do in terms of building a business and sort of maintaining the sort of levels that are required for a pipe band. I think that's and you just and family as well. It's not just the pipe band. It's I was working until 7:00, whatever, printing out the music for the band hall, and then running into the house, and then saying goodnight to the kids, and then running out the front door.
Yeah,
and you can't do that.
Yeah, it's tough. It makes me think of I remember Ross Walker, who was pipe major of Vogel for a number of years, and when I joined the band, he was the pipe major, and I always thought that every pipe majors in grade 1, at least the top 6, they were all professional. That was their rather teaching or and it was often the case. And then he I don't know if he's still in the same company, but he was pretty high up in a company, and I was just like, wow, it must be really hard to balance being a professional piper on the weekend and at night, because at that point you're professional, but also be really successful at work during the day and balance things out. So often I think people having discussion with people around the world, I imagine top 6 band, it's led by professional leading drummer or pipe major, or even that a lot of the players are professional, which is true. A lot of them are, but some are also just employees or own a business somewhere else. So
yeah, it's a hard juggle, that's for sure, and especially I think it's the family aspects makes it even more difficult.
Right.
And I was really interested, actually, coming off the back of COVID, to see how COVID would have affected band sizes, just because knowing what I knew in terms of giving it up and not going to band practice, how much time you then sort of claw back, and having that maybe imposed on players. I thought it'd be interesting to see how many would go back and how many sort of would say, actually, I'm not going back anymore.
Yeah.
But it's actually been refreshing to see. I think the band sizes look pretty healthy. And
it does. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
So, I think there's definitely, it's a young man's game, definitely. And I think that's, when I was back in the days at Shots, there was some older boys that were sort of still, I say older boys, are probably my age now.
Now you're thinking back, you're like, actually, they were my age. God damn it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, we never know, right? You said you took a little break between Shots and Fife, and now obviously you're taking a break. We never know. I hope I'll see you around playing.
my chanter is still always sort of lying around, and sometimes we'll pick it up and quite quickly put it back in again once I realise how bad my fingers are. But yeah, it's there. My son Grayson, he is expressing a little bit of an interest in bagpipes, so we'll see if we can get. We've got him the chanter, and his grandfather in Sydney, Barry, is desperate for him to play. So we were over in Sydney start of the year actually, and bagpipe lessons were high on the agenda.
Start them young. That's awesome. Yeah, I imagine. That's great.
So yeah, never say never. It's been such a huge part of my life in terms of obviously meeting Rhiannon, and a lot of the business stuff is actually related to shots. One of the guys who I played with at Shots had his own architectural business, and I ended up working for him for a number of years. And so a lot of the decisions that have formed basically who I am have basically come through pipe bands. Yeah, so very grateful.
All right. Well, yeah, I don't want to take too much of your time, but thank you so much. Is there anything you want to collab before we wrap up? Anything professionally?
No, I think all good. Thank you very much for having me, Glenn. Hopefully there's been some nuggets in there that have been useful. And,
for sure. Yeah. And all the stories, especially the one with Jake missing the bus the day after the shot. So after the World. So that'll be a fun one to talk about with him, hopefully one day. But thank you so much. I don't know if you're planning on going to the Worlds in Glasgow this weekend, but should be good fun.
Yeah, I can't make it this weekend, unfortunately. The first Worlds that I've missed for a long time. So I dare say that I'll be tuning in for the results as they're coming out. But all the best to all the bands. And, hope to catch up soon.
Sounds good. All right. Take care. Bye-bye.